Hello everyone and welcome back to Planet Zoo. Today we're going to be finishing off our entrance or visitors centre for this Taste of Africa / Wild Africa habitat. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it yet, but it's basically going to give everyone a taste of Africa. If you've been watching this build so far, we started out this basic structure for the visitor centre, and we're going to be rounding off this nice little viewing area today where we've put in the fountain. We're going to be doing a few changes to things just to make it look a little bit nicer. But again, it's a pretty basic build, not really going to be anything amazing that you've not already seen, but I want to get this finished so that I can move on. I feel like I've spent a lot of time on this one, and I want to move into other parts of the zoo. But it was important to get this done because I want to start shifting all of our animals across into a larger space so that I can redesign our entrance area and really expand this park into something incredible. We've moved on a few years and while I've been testing things, and we've got a lot more money in the bank, but we're still on about 1,500 visitors. The star rating is 3 out of 5, so we've still got a bit of work to do to flesh this out a lot more and make it more appealing to visitors. So I kind of want to switch focus a little bit, but my next build is going to be my reptile house. I always said I was going to do that, and that's not changed. So at the end of this episode, you'll actually see me plotting out the basic foundation for that building. But once that's done, I'm going to spend a few episodes going over the park and touching things up and making it look a little bit more three-dimensional, shall we say. I don't want to have, because everything's just kind of flat right now, and it's not very appealing as a build. It's not very aesthetically pleasing. It's just basic structures with a few extra touches thrown in, and I want them to really stand out. I also am going to peel back a little bit from doing these huge builds because I found myself short of inspiration on this one, and as I explained in the last episode, I got a little bit frustrated with it, and it really stunted the growth of the zoo and actually the amount of episodes I was putting out, which I didn't really like that about it. So here you can see we're just making some timber frames. I wanted this to be kind of open and have an awning over it rather than actually be a building. And I'm doing a little bit of experimenting with these bamboo platforms, but it didn't really work out. So this went through quite a few changes, as you'll see in this episode. I wanted to swap things around, and some things didn't work, others did. So these were going to be advertising boards or have the TV screens on with the animal descriptions and things, the education boards, if you want me to be really specific about it. And I thought it looked cool, but the proportions were a little bit off, and they didn't quite sit right on those beams that I'd put in, and it just made it look a little bit clunky and weird. So did play around a little bit more to see if I could make it work, but it just wasn't, and I kind of gave up on that idea. So I moved around to another part and just tried to get something working. I think it was really important to try this out, and I'm pretty confident I'll use it somewhere else in the zoo. Played around with a few roof pieces to try and create this awning that I wanted, but it just didn't really work. And I think, again, it's probably because the size of this build has reduced significantly, and it wasn't really lending itself to actually, everything just kind of looked a little bit compact and strange. So maybe when we move on to building something a little bigger, on a bit of a grander scale, it might work out that we can actually use these. And what I'm probably also going to do is we'll put out a few episodes where I make little clusters and little parts of builds or new walls and materials and stuff that I can then incorporate into these main build episodes, because I think I've spent a lot of time, as you can see, trying to get things to work. And what I want to do for these builds is just have everything ready to go, get the pieces made, and then just bring them into place so that we can actually create and experience this zoo in action, which we haven't yet done outside of a few shorts where you get a little tour, which isn't great. So these beams I wanted to carry on, and then I kind of had this idea to, the walls in Jurassic Park with the electric fences. Kind of had an idea to create something similar, which you'll see a bit later on, because we tried to make these beams go all the way around, and it again looked a bit strange. I didn't really like how it was working, and although it looks nice and I can see it working at some point, having this entire platform covered in them wasn't really doing it for me. So I still carried on and tried to get it into place, but it just didn't work. And again, just switching those boards around to see if we could get something. See, I thought that looked quite nice, but again, it was just too cramped and compact, and I wanted the visitors to have this nice open space where they could see the animals, attend talks and things like that. And we do get a nice crowd in there. There is a couple of issues with visibility and things where they complain that they can't see the warthogs or anything like that, but there is so much space in this exhibit. There will be places where they can go and get up close and personal, like the cave I created. They can go through there, see the warthogs sleeping and stuff. And we'll probably do a few things with feeder placements just so that we can make sure that there is going to be an area for people to see. The next thing I did was try and put a roof over this. And again, it started out quite well and I could see it working. Getting the angles right, having these sort of resting on the beams, and I thought it would look really nice. The problem I then had was, due to the size of those pieces that we were using, everything once again looked big, clunky, and the proportions weren't off. So you'll see me trying to get this matched up, and it did work and it looked pretty good, and I could put some glass frontages on the actual mid piece. But overall I wasn't really happy with how it kind of looked, and the idea was that this would be a part open awning, but it started looking a little bit like the coverings of a football stadium, and that's not what we're going for. It's an animal viewing area, so that wasn't doing it for me, and eventually I end up taking them out. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about how this is all going to work. So we've got some nice benches, and the overall idea was to eventually have this as kind of half open, half not. And I did carry that on. I just designed it a little bit differently. So this becomes this nice actual building with a deck. I then also thought in the future we're probably going to want to change up that entrance piece where they actually go up the stairs onto the main part of the platform and make that look a little bit decorative. And I had this idea. We have this container park where I live, right next door to where I record my videos. Actually, it was an empty site, and they brought in a load of shipping containers and made these little pop-up restaurants and bars and stuff, and it looks really nice. So I thought I'd take some inspiration from that. They basically have, it looks like a miniature festival, and they have lights hanging down, moving across from one place to the other, and little tables and chairs and some heaters and things so you can just hang out when it's cold, and it's all really kind of like almost like IKEA. And I really like that, so I'm going to start using sort of those kind of ideas to make little guest areas in the zoo. And I thought I'd pilot that here. So we do have our two buildings, but we'd make that area where they come up onto the platform look like one of these festival type container park things. Obviously I'm not going to be putting in shipping containers and stuff, but actually that might be something that I do for another build. Maybe we'll make something that looks like that for another area of the zoo. I was thinking actually we could do it for like penguins or something, or when I put in a water-based habitat, which I think would look really cool to have, you know, shipping containers coming off a boat and then placed in, and they're just left there. So we decide to make it this huge restaurant area with shops and stuff. Anyway, moving back on, you can see the kind of Jurassic Park inspiration now, where I've put in these metal fence posts going across in between these logs. We took those ones out because that just wasn't working, and we had this basic structure. So as you can see in the background there, we've got this wooden beams with metal railings going across, and then a gap where we can have a animal talk happening. And then over here, we just wanted to make this a nice little open place, have it covered so that they weren't getting rained on and things, and just a nice seating area where people can go chill out by the fountain and enjoy the scenery a little bit and just have a little rest from all of the animals that they've experienced in this huge habitat. The other thing I could do actually, once we've unlocked it through research, is have a 4x4 tour going all the way through this habitat. Could just make it a little mini one that loops around, and then that front area in between the two buildings when you come off the platform, we could make that the pick up and drop off point. We could even build a little monorail track going all the way around, but I don't want it to interfere with the habitat too much. So we're just making this all glass. I really like it because you get a lot of natural light coming through, and that's what this is all about, making sure that we maintain the connection to nature through this build by allowing as much of the outside to be seen from one place, including in areas that we have covered over, because I didn't want this to be looking like a proper building. I kind of wanted it to make it kind of like a modern Roman forum type place where you have the columns and you can walk through, but it's essentially still an outside space. So we covered everything over in glass, and as you can see, the mother elephant is looking a little bit cramped in there, and also given where the placement of our new walls are going to be, it's not going to work, so we do end up taking her out. I did like how that was working, but I thought the fountain as a whole and this build as a whole worked much better without that piece in place. And then what we could do is put in an extra wall and make this like a rockery of some sort, and have an actual custom waterfall trickling down the rock face that we then put in place. Things are starting to come together here, and I'm quite happy. It has been a bit of a long ride to get to this stage, and it's only been a small build, but the amount of planning and things that we've had to do, and experimenting and changing things left, right and centre, it's whilst I would have liked to have done more with this, I'm happy with what we have, and I think I'm looking forward to moving on to my next build. I will probably come back here before our next episode when we build the reptile centre and flesh it out a little bit more, and I'll be doing that off camera, and then we'll do a full tour and you can see this really working in action, because I think it's important to show you what I do off camera, and I just want to see you guys enjoying my builds when they're finally finished, rather than just going, there, that's done, let's move on. I also want to tighten up the joins between walls and stuff like that, just to make things nice and uniform. So here we just decided to put some mulch down to make this a nice planter. The issue that I had was, after putting this down, the animals actually registered the plants in this as being in their biome and didn't like it, even though the outline of the habitat doesn't go anywhere near this. I mean, I don't think it does. We might have some invisible walls going through here, which we actually do, and they may be causing an issue, but that's something I can look at off camera. Next thing to do was to create this artificial rock face, just make it looking nice and three-dimensional, not like this weird flat surface that's currently going on. So we'll have a couple of rocks poking out, and then we'll probably put a nice water feature in running down, maybe put a nice trim across the top so that it looks like we've got this actual thing producing water flowing down into the pond, and also have the elephant shooting water into it as well. Put a bit of greenery on just to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional, and I'm pretty happy with how that's turned out. It was just a case of really finishing this off by putting some nice trims on the top here. I eventually settled on the log trims because I just think they make a nice, they finish it off really nice. This is what I don't like about the plaster, is the joins that they have with certain other materials don't sit quite right. So we replaced that plaster with wood and put a glass pane in. You can also see there's still some pathing issues sticking out, and I'm going to tidy them up off cam. I don't really want to devote a whole episode to doing that sort of stuff because it gets boring to watch. If it's boring for me to do, it's certainly boring for you to watch. And then the last thing was to really kind of work out what we were going to do with that top bit, and I'm going to leave that and have a little think about it. So what I next planned to do, after we put in all of the donation boxes, was build a second like animal barn. Just wanted to put a few more bins in. The upstairs area I'm just going to leave as seating for now. So we'll put a few more benches in, and we'll just put an animal talk down as well, I think, in the corner there. move the giraffe feeder a touch and then move a few other feeders around, just so that people can get this nice up close and personal experience with the animals. Then I decided to make this area at the back a animal hide, and I made a custom one for now, and I think it's just going to sit in nice. I wanted to make it mud just to fit in with the Africa theme, and we just made this huge building that animals can go in to escape, rest, take shelter from the rain and sleep. This originally was going to be part of the main building, so I was going to have a huge like barn that visitors could go in and see all the animals sleeping, and it became this like combined thing that was open on 2 walls, but that experiment really didn't go to plan. It was such a large scale build that I did not have the, I suppose, patience but also time for it either. It really makes you appreciate the amount of effort that the big builders put into in creating their amazing habitats. So that was in place, and we just needed to put some roof on it. I started going with mud, but I didn't like it. It was too flat. It didn't add anything really. So I swapped to the thatched roofs, and it was just a case of getting the correct pieces in and making sure that it looked realistic and pretty at the same time. Now this is always just going to be a placeholder. I'd quite like to mess around with the terrain a little bit and change things up a little bit more, so that we don't have this basic building just thrown in place. But for now I think it would do, and it would let me actually run the zoo for a little bit, which I haven't done for a long time, actually just run it and experience it in action. So I was looking forward to that, and I thought it was important to actually just build this, throw in some beds for the animals, just to make sure that they're got a place to sleep and a place to escape all the madness. And I've left it open at the back so that guests can see the animals sleeping when they do go around there, but at the moment they don't really have much reason to take a walk. I also had a bit of a realization that if I do have these paths going all the way around, there is a chance that guests may actually just start walking, and one day when I'm doing these episodes I'll find a guest right at the back of the park by the by the mountains who's just walked and walked and walked and not thought about where they were going. So we put a little bit of flora and fauna down, but this does need a lot more of a refresh and a lot more work done to it, just to make it not look like this flat piece of land really. I'm making a habitat. I want it to look natural and realistic, not just, hey, we're running an animal farm here. So I tried sinking some of these rocks down just to make the area look a little bit more rocky, but it didn't work, and it's probably just because of the style of rock that I'm using, so we just left that. Did a touch of terrain modification just to make it stand out a little bit more, moving some trees around, and did the same over at this point. Wanted this to kind of carry on up to the cave system that we've built, and at the moment this foreground of the zoo is looking a little bit too flat, so I thought bringing that out a little bit more would be a good idea. Finally, it was time to lay the foundations for our reptile centre. Now this is going to be a strange one. We are moving the crocodiles to it, but we're not going to have an underwater viewing area here like we do in the first part of the zoo. I'm just going to make it this building that has an outside and an inside part of the habitat for the crocodiles. We're going to allow the guests to walk in, there's going to be some exhibits, and then they'll come to this crocodile habitat that's a little bit less spacious than the other one, but you get a better view. And it was just a case of mapping that out so that next episode we can go full pelt into the build and really get it finished off. I don't know if we're going to do this over 2 floors. I don't have a lot of experience with working over 2 floors, and I don't want to make the mistakes that I've made already in designing it. Anyway, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been fun to do, and I'm really glad to feel like I'm getting back on track with things, so I'm looking forward to doing more. Make sure you drop me a like and a subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.